Hey friends, today I'm going to talk about one of our interesting technique. We call it as a six thinking hats. This was described by Edward de Bono, and hence we often call it as Edward de Bono's six thinking hats. And I'm Dr. Subhash Khatri. Okay, here's this guy, Edward de Bono. He was a physician from Malta who has described something about lateral thinking uh, in a book called Six Thinking Hats. Basically, it's a tool for decision making and problem solving. Let's understand that this is knowledge, this is experience, and this is creativity. In order to have creativity, we need to have a kind of lateral thinking. So the question comes is, what is six thinking hats? As I said in the beginning, it's a decision making technique or the tool. You can even think it is a kind of brainstorming, a group discussion, a creative thinking way, a parallel thinking, otherwise problem solving approach. Just look at this picture where the person is trying to put different color hats. This entire technique reminds me of the childhood story that I heard about blind people trying to look at an elephant and describing the elephant, and all of them they think that they are right. So someone who could see this part said elephant is like a snake. Someone who could feel the legs said elephant is like a tree. In short, each one is right and each one is wrong. Each one is right because they have perceived it that way. Each one is wrong because they had not seen the big picture. So, in my personal opinion, the six thinking hat can help us to even look at the big picture. So, let's just look at what is the traditional way of thinking. In traditional way, when we are talking to each other, we might land up in so-called argument. And when you are arguing with each other, actually you don't listen to each other. You're just listening to find out the point where you can actually argue further. So what happens is most of the time uh, this is like leading to confrontation because we have got different opinions, otherwise views, and this is what it happens in traditional way of thinking, otherwise argument. Uh, Otherwise we call it as adversarial thinking also. Now look at the parallel thinking. Just opposite to argument, otherwise traditional thinking, is a parallel thinking. Now here what happens is two or more individuals think in the same direction. So that's how we call it as a parallel thinking. So this kind of thinking avoids argument. This kind of thinking is like more creative, and it actually encourages a kind of constructive criticism, otherwise say decision making. So basically it avoids argument and we think in the same direction. Now the question comes is, how is it possible? So let's look ahead. Now thinking the direction can be changed. So now question is how to change the thinking. Okay, here the direction is represented by the hat. So hat represents the direction of the thinking. So whichever the color of hat you put up, you ask the next person also to put up the same hat. So that means you are thinking, you are talking, you are discussing from the same point of view. Now thinking in one direction is, we call it as parallel thinking. Now question is, why parallel thinking? It separates the ego from performance, or ego as well as performance. It actually helps in cooperative exploration. It is more of constructive and creative. It increases the awareness and it provides a switching modes about thinking. So now what are the basics? The first basic is very simple. That is, hat represents a thinking icon. So when you are wearing different kind of colors of the hats, you have thinking icons there. The six imaginary hats you can put on or take off as per the requirement of your say this entire technique, otherwise discussion, otherwise brainstorming session. Now let's look at the next point. Each hat is a different color and represents type or mode of thinking. We'll see how exactly it goes. We all wear the same hat at the same time. When we change hat, we change our thinking. So let's look at this rule. When we change our hat, we change our thinking. And basically thinking is represented by hat. Now let's look at different colors of the hat. So as we said, we have 6 different color hats. The white represents about more of facts. A red is more about your feelings, just like fire. Yellow color tells us more like sunshine, otherwise it tells us about the benefits. Black is like a judge, so it tells us more about cautions. Green is like more of creativity, so like we say vegetable and rich grow. So green represents more of growth, otherwise creativity. And the blue, just like sky is blue, it tells us exactly the process. So let's summarize. White is like facts, otherwise white paper. Red is more like feelings, otherwise emotions, or you can call it as even gut feeling. Yellow is more about benefits. Black is more about cautions. Green is about creativity, and blue is about the process. Now let's look in a different way. As I said, the blue is about process, white is about the information, yellow is telling us about the possibility, the black is telling about possible risk, red is telling about emotions, and the green tells us about creativity. Now look at it how we grow. So just look at it. When you are using different kind of the color of the hats, ultimately you go to the highest peak of your success as well as the self-development. Now, if you'd like to see the actual videos by De Bono talking about the 6 thinking hat, these are different links. Now, we spoke about white hat, we spoke about red hat. So it's about more about your intuitions. A yellow hat is about advantages, otherwise benefit. Black is telling about risks. Green is telling about lateral thinking. We as a green hat, so you look for possible new ideas, otherwise solutions. Blue is more about process. So to control organizing thinking itself, you can wear the blue hat. Then you can set the focus. Then you can monitor and reflect the thinking process itself. And blue is basically for planning. So this is the summary of what we had seen about different colors of the hat. So red is intuition, information is white, constructive is yellow, that's why blue is more about process, otherwise reflections, reflective, creative is green, and cautious is black. Okay, this is mind mapping about this entire technique. We call it as a 6 thinking hats. I don't think I need to explain this more into the details, but let's look at once again. This is white, the green, the yellow, the red is talking about emotions, hunches, feelings, gut feelings, we call it as instincts. The black is more about critic, otherwise analysis. The blue is more about process like agenda, decision, global overview. So now what are the steps in 6 thinking hats? First you got to agree on a topic, then give some time to prepare for the discussion. Now the question comes is why to prepare for the discussion. I hope you remember that we spoke about the white hat, which requires some facts, figures and information. So one can gather the information, then understand the gathered information, decide the best way. It's not necessary for you to use all hats. You can even control the time, discipline, sequence, and I would say that you can even repeat a kind of color hat. So understand 2 things. One is it is not necessary to use all hats, and second one is if required you can repeat the color of the hat as per your requirement. Add the element of play or play along with it so that it becomes more interesting. Now, this can be a short outline about how you can go and plan it. So look at it. You can put on first blue hat, then white hat, then green hat, then red hat, then yellow hat. You can control the time so that you can control entire this session about six thinking hats. Now, what is the role of facilitator? So you got to define the focus of your thinking, otherwise subject, otherwise topic. Plan the sequence of hats and timing of thinking. Ask for the changes in the thinking if needed. Handle the requests from the group members. Then form a periodic and final summaries of thinking for consideration by a team. Then what is the role of participant? Follow the lead of six thinking hats by facilitator. So you got to follow the instructions given by the facilitator, otherwise you can call it as even moderator also. Stick to the hat, that is type of thinking that is in current use. So that means, say for example, if you're wearing the black hat, then you just got to talk about the cautions, precautions, critics, and so on and so forth. You can't talk about something else when you're wearing the black hat. Now try to work within the time limit so that overall time can be controlled. Contribute honestly and fully under each of the hats. Now, what are different ways to use the six thinking hats? You can use it even individually, alone, to make a decision, and ideally you can use this hat. So otherwise, you can just imagine that you're putting this hat. That means a mode of thinking. You can use it even in meetings, so you can avoid the boring meetings. You can use it even in conversation, and you can actually say that, okay, let's talk about first, say, blue hat, now let's talk about a red hat. Likewise, you can use the six thinking hats even when you're presenting reports, or you have some presentations. Even this is one of the interesting way of doing the group discussion. So now sequence does make a difference. uh, Look at it. If you're actually looking for initial ideas about a kind of a problem, otherwise a topic, then the best way is start with the blue, then go ahead with white, green, and you can finish with the blue. So you can look at all the sequences. Most of the sequences are starting with the blue and ending with even blue. Now if you want to take, say, quick feedback, then you can start with the blue, then go ahead with the black, green, and blue. You want to solve the problem, then one of the best way is start with the blue, then white, green, red, yellow, black, green, and end up with the blue. On the contrary, if you're looking for the performance review, then the best way is start with the blue, then red, white, yellow, black, green, and blue. So let me say that you can decide the sequence whichever way you like it. This is just a kind of reported way how it can work for you if you follow the sequence. But mind well, most of these sequences are starting with the blue and ending with the blue. Now, what are the uses of the six thinking hats? It can help you for problem solving, it can help you for strategic planning, it can help you in running meetings, and many more things. So now look at an example or a topic or a problem to be solved. Say the problem is build a new office. The directors of a property company are considering whether they should build a new office block. The economy is doing well, and the vacant office spaces in their city are being snapped up. As part of their decision making process, they adopt the six thinking hats technique. So just imagine that you're part of this team and you're thinking about building a new office. When it comes to my field, say physiotherapy, we can think about using the six thinking hats as one of the way to do the problem solving. We call it as PBL. Otherwise, you can call it as a problem-based learning also. You can even use it for the case discussion, otherwise simulated cases. So you can actually describe the situation or a case, and then you can discuss in a group with the six thinking hats. You can even use this six thinking hat for even small problems, like say you want to buy a car. Now the question is which brand of the car, which color, and so on and so forth. So if you use the six thinking hat, you can make each one involved in this decision making, say your family members, make happy that okay, after considering all possible ways, we had come to this conclusion, so that each one is happy, each one is thinking in a parallel way. So you can think about n number of problems that can help you actually to come to a solution. So basically, use six thinking hats when you want to find out a solution for a problem and come to the decision making. So once again, it's like DMT, decision making tool for you. Now, what are the benefits of six thinking hat? It allows you to focus, that is one thing at a time, as per the color of the hat there that you're putting it on. It removes the ego and confrontation. Uh, I think there's a spell mistake here. It create, evaluate, implement, action plan. Then it can save your time. It can bring diversity of the thoughts. Uh, Use of more of our brains in different ways, provides a common language for all of us. Now, what are the disadvantages of the STH, that is six thinking hats? It actually sometimes can be a time consuming tool. It requires a bit of training, it requires a bit of practice before you become a master in six thinking hats. So it's worth trying it out, maybe with your students, otherwise uh, friends, relatives, family members, even in the meetings also, as a kind of change, I would say. Now the question is, what is the result of six thinking hat? A decision seems to make themselves. So when you're using the six thinking hat, automatically you can just imagine that the decision pops up to you. So thanks for listening, and I'm Dr. Subhash Khatri. We'll stop here.